So, I'm a little obsessed with blackout nights. Has anyone attended? And I know that might sound like a controversial question, but many of the blackout nights I've attended have not been completely blacked out, and that's part of the experience in Toronto. So, anyone attended a blackout night? Yes? Okay. At Tarragon? No? Yes. What shows? Do you recall, or at least one of them? Okay. When it comes to you. So, for those who don't know, this is a general description. A blackout night is a dedicated theatrical performance designed to invite black identifying audiences to experience a show together, often created for plays highlighting black stories. These nights provide a dedicated space for community, aiming to foster a sense of belonging and allow patrons to experience the art free from the white gaze. And I would say white et al. in this sense. So essentially, we can go to the next slide. I think I have a little history that I want to go through. Okay. This is, from my perspective, a timeline that I want to share. So, back in 1997 up until 2006, at the top center, there was the Afro-Canadian Playwrights Festival held at Canadian Stage. This was artistically led by Janet Sears, who's a playwright and a professor at University of Toronto in the drama department. Um, uh, Playwright, Harlem Duet, and the Black Girl in Search of God, I believe. I don't want to butcher that, sorry. But essentially, this was bringing together Black arts practitioners across Canada. It was, I guess, a mecca in a sense. Um, I attended the final one. I think it was biannual, so every other year. And it was inspired by August Wilson's speech, The Ground on Which I Stand. And 50 Canadian playwrights of African descent came together for this Black Playwriting Festival. And it had a really great support system with Canadian Stage, University College Drama Program, UFT, Playwrights Guild. Is that working? Thank you. And this was a pivotal point for me because I had attended a typical school of the arts, and all that I had learned at that time, I graduated in 2005, was essentially white male playwrights. And so I wasn't exposed to anything different, and I had an assumption that it just didn't exist. And so this opened my eyes to tangible human writers, very creative, very diverse, representing, stories from here in Canada and then across the world. That introduced me to like To Be Young, Janet Sears herself, um, many other playwrights that I'll mention as we go forward. But this, in a sense, too, was like a blackout, my first blackout, because a lot of times these spaces are, in a sense, invisible because it's not mainstream and we don't hear about it, maybe in the collective theater space. So when I think about blackout nights, I don't necessarily think about them happening in mainstream spaces. I just think about it as a gathering of Black folks. And so I attribute this gathering as my first blackout night. Then we can fast forward to Rock Paper Sisters, Audrey Zena Mandiela founded Be Current. That's up in the corner there. And Rock Paper Sisters was kind of like the place to be to see new work happening in the community. And um, it was not just Black artists, it was artists of color, but it prioritized and emphasized women of color, Black women. And that has more or less continued on until 2024. But again, really incredible new work. The audience is vibrant. I mean, theater etiquette in general is quite calm and relaxed and quiet. But if you go to a space where, you have Black people enjoying work, it is vibrant, it is punchy, it is call and response, and I would say, in a sense, a little bit of an opposite in experience. And so the call for Blackout Nights, if we just want to fast forward, because essentially Peace of Mind Festival is really inspired by Rock Paper Sisters, and that's my own creative vision. But when we get to 2019, Documents, a show called Documents. This was, I guess, a tippy toe into bringing Blackout Nights to the mainstream. There was an artist from New York named Amber King, and she had asked, I guess, the producer, for one of these shows, is it possible to have an invite only of Black audience members? You can reach out to your network, but I think it would be really important for the type of work that we're doing to make space. And essentially, this show was a bit of a drinking game. It was like, hey guys, let's just talk about all of the things that we have gone through, the joys, the pains, the trauma. And it would be like, raise your hand or drink if you so choose, if you've had to send your parents money as an adult. Like, hey, can you break me off some change? And it was nice because in a, I guess, mainstream space, I would feel uncomfortable answering those questions. And I wouldn't want to feel singled out, and I would make a lot of assumptions within my own self. And it would be, there would be some tension there. So this did, for me, create a safe space to talk about things that, may be uncomfortable, shameful, but with people that you feel would understand and have somewhat of a collective experience. We're not talking about a monolith, but you have that trust that we have some of these same experiences. And then in 2020, and a little bit before, there was a show called Slave Play on Broadway, which was very popular, very controversial. And I won't get into the show itself, but I mean, the name itself kind of makes you take a step back. This show was, the producers of this show decided that they wanted to have a blackout night. So this is kind of the first public blackout night invite. And it was in Broadway, I think 800 seat theater, and it was spectacular. And then we started to see some of, I guess, the public backlash to why am I not invited to this play? It feels wrong. It feels like a form of segregation, and these types of conversations came to the surface. When I was doing The Negroes Are Congregating in 2020, the producer at Theater Pass Mirai, Fatuma, said, hey, I heard about this happening in New York, and I think that would be really on the nose for this show because it is talking specifically about internalized racism. There's a lot of satire, a lot of comedy, and a lot of highs and lows. And I was like, sure, I'm down. Be great. I'm used to majority, all black audiences, so this is my norm. Let's do it. And then there's some voices in the room that are saying, we have to think about safety, as far as people who may be upset, people who want to still attend. And I was like, okay, let's talk about a plan of action, because it's never, a bodyguard at the door saying you are allowed in and you are not. There is no policing. It's just an invitation and an intention, I would say. And this show was pay what you can. It was very accessible, and it was oversold. We kind of had to make space where there was no space, and hope that the fire department wasn't notified. But what I noticed that night was that the actors were alive in a way that I hadn't seen them for previous performances. The audience was catching things. The points that were intended to laugh or be silent, those were wishy-washy in other shows. And I just felt it had like incredible electricity, that I was like, this might be my favorite performance of all time. And it was nice to witness and see, like, essentially this experiment has worked. And I think it caught fire. And, 6 days later, I'm sorry, 6 years later, I would say it's a bit of a norm where there's a production that is written by a black artist, intended for black audiences, and there's a blackout night. And other shows that I've worked on is Slave Play here at Canadian Stage, and a local playwright, Kanika Ambrose, who did a show back in December with Necessary Angel. And again, I'm like, if there's a blackout night, I'll try and make it. And that's essentially it, because it's just, it's more of a fulfilling experience for me. We can go to the next slide. I don't know if this can play. If there is Wi-Fi capabilities, we can just show a little clip of this advertisement. And if not, we can move forward if it doesn't come up. And any questions so far? Like, we'll get to the engaging part, but, just doing a little dive beforehand. In the meantime, between time, I'll just describe it. So we have our 3 actors here for The Negroes Are Congregating. This was for E-Talk. And we had done a workshop before we started rehearsals for the show. And I wanted to get a temperature of how did the actors themselves feel about the piece. Did they feel comfortable? Did they agree? I mean, it's talking about race basically the entire show, which in itself can be very draining. And I think at those first few days in workshop, that's what I got. Some discomfort, and some actors saying, like, I really don't know if we need to keep talking about this. Are we beating a dead horse? It's a lot to unpack. Fast forward to rehearsals. I think they were warming up to and feeling a little bit, oh, thank you, I think you're getting a separate link. Feeling more comfortable with the material and taking ownership of it. By the time the blackout night happened, I felt like it was a complete switch where it's like, oh, this is part of the experience of the work is the audience. And I don't think we talk about that much because I was working on the show for many years, pretty much from 2015 to 2020, and we had taken it different places, Memphis, Tennessee, Atlanta, Switzerland, Geneva, Switzerland, Halifax, and every audience is unique and special. But I would notice for some audiences, I would say majority white, there would be a discomfort sometimes, especially a summer works performance, where we had a round table after the show, which I think became an integral part of the show. Thank you, Summer Works, for introducing that. Of having a conversation after the work of like, what do we think about this? How do we feel? How do we relate? What are we taking away? Because sometimes you don't even get that direct feedback as a playwright, and you don't know how your work is being received. But to see it live in action, to have the audience kind of discussing amongst themselves and not just a Q&A of like, yeah, I think that show's great, we should bring it to schools or something. That's kind of the general comment section. But to say, oh, I didn't know that was offensive. I've said that before. And this, like, that type of processing, that was really beautiful for me. But we would also get feedback like, oh, can we take a picture with the cast? And like, oh, let's turn on the lights because someone's too dark. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And wanting to protect the actors, even audience members saying in that Summer Works production, like, I didn't know if I could laugh out loud at that. That was my inclination, but I didn't know. I felt watched watching the work. And I'm like, valid. Just like I was talking about that show where Raise Your Hand If, I would feel watched. And that's part of, that term, the white gaze. Sometimes it's not even happening, but it's your how you're raised to believe that you are always being watched, and not only in the theater, but pretty much anywhere you go. So in that clip, they said, this show's happening, it's great, whatever. And on March 3rd, there's going to be a blackout night where it's only Black audience members. And the comments were like, this is BS. And I was like, it's a weird way to describe what we're doing. And I find that if we do get back to the slides, we can look at different ways that shows are being described. If Obsidian's having a blackout night, it might be, thank you. It might be, hey guys, we're having a blackout night, come turn up. And so there'll be a little, whatever, shindig after. Whereas, a more mainstream, thank you, theater company might be more cautious and ambiguous about what's happening. And there might be a long script to say, this is why we're doing this. This is for the Black community. Everybody is welcome. There is no doors barred. If you have any questions, please contact us. And it's kind of just like tippy-toeing around what's happening. And so it does create a little bit of discomfort. And then you do show up and say, oh, this is not a blackout night, really? Because it's not cut and dry as it should be, in my opinion. So here's some of the pushback that's I can share. And this was like do we go on Reddit? It's a nice little comment section. It's like, hey guys, what do we think about blackout nights? This was the prompt. And This was like, yeah, I definitely don't agree with an all black or white, green, yellow, etc. anything, as a black male putting that label on an event feels counterproductive. If restrictions are applied due to the race, then it just seems to hold back the whole idea of equality. Plus, what do I do if I'm mixed with another race? Can I still go? Valid, but I think sometimes too much thought and value is placed on these shows. Yes, if you're mixed, you can still go. Um, and I think that would go for your family. You know what I mean? It's understandable, and I mean we're more and more mixed up these days, and that's why a lot of other times they won't just say black; it'll say black identifying, which is a little bit of a new terminology. Um, and also, as I said, we're not a monolith, and so some people just feel like, hey, that's not for me, or it's not speaking to me, and I prefer to go on another night. Totally fine. And also, blackout nights is not just where black people are only invited. I mean, they come to every other show. So it's not prescriptive in any way. And all our welcome policy is the only solution. Any only one type are welcome is inherently flawed, divisive, and deeply counterproductive. And then I think, well, let's again think back to preference, experience, um, experiment. There are plenty of examples in our world, like school. There's all girls schools, all boys schools. There are art schools. There are schools for queer children. There's Afrocentric schools. This is a choice that parents have outside of public school if they want a more tailored education for the children. For one night out of probably a 2 week run, it may be, unfortunately, the only night that someone who doesn't identify as black may not be able to come. That's part of, I guess, the sacrifice for this programming. But I would say 95 to 99% of the time, it's not the case. We can go to the next slide. You want to join? All right. So as I was mentioning before, sorry, um, this is an example of Come to a Blackout Night by Obsidian Theater, which is culturally specific theater, presents work by black artists. And this is Canadian stage and predominantly white-led organization. And so I made the text a little big here, but you can see it's pretty to the point, and it's speaking to, our own community. So it's like everyone understands what's going on. And this is a bit more, and this is not the full, I didn't have space to put the full copy here, but it is a little bit more thorough and explanatory. And in a sense, kind of like this is for a community that we don't necessarily serve on a regular basis. So it has those notes in there that I've highlighted. So that's something I note of like where the intention is and where some of the tension might be. We can go to the next slide. Just some examples of blackout nights and also black gatherings that are happening. Again, that may not be well known in mainstream. So we have an example of Ian Kamau at Luminato, Blackout Night, Blackout Night, most recent, I think, How to Catch Creation at Soul Pepper, The Slave Play, and I don't know if I could read this up here. As I said, like a time of past, can't beat a Blackout Night crowd. but I'm done with that. Can't beat a blackout night crowd if you see the crowd is jumping, okay? So this is a basketball show, but regardless, I would say that's to be expected. The audience is engaging, even if the show is not for going beyond the fourth wall, it is anyway. Back in the day, there was a movie theater called Sheridan Mall at Sheridan Mall. It was a Toonie Tuesday. Majority of people were coming from Jane and Finch or Brampton or wherever, and that was a blackout night theater experience. People were like, "No," it's a scary movie. No, run, you idiot! Like, and I'm like, it was just very like these are core memories for me because I'm like, it's not what I might get at like Scotiabank Theater downtown. So that's, the space that's created organically. This is a gathering of 100 Black women that Anik Jordan put together at the AGO, kind of honoring visual artists and an artist in the city. Can do next slide. Oh, and that's also DeBe Young's theater, celebrating Black women in theater. That happened a few months ago in the center there. Okay, and I have to give a really big shout out. I'm not going to read this entire slide, but this was a Facebook post that Tanisha Tate did, who's the artistic director of Cahoots. Kind of a really good point I found on the purpose, the significance, the urgency of blackout nights. I'll just read the first paragraph and maybe the last sentence. Some folks think that blackout night divides. I wouldn't spend my time justifying it if I wasn't for the fact what? I wouldn't spend my time justifying it if I wasn't for the fact that I admit not to. Okay, this is Facebook, guys. What's loud? I admit to not really being down with the concept when I first heard about it 3 years ago. And Tanisha Tate's a Black artistic director. It felt a bit segregationist to me at the time when the exact opposite seemed needed. Then I went to one. It was an absolutely beautiful night, and as much as I adore seeing theater with mixed audiences of different ages and races, I was struck to realize how much I needed a night like that. I felt a wave of emotion I did not anticipate. Although we represented many different cultures and nationalities, sitting in the room laughing and feeling and exhaling with people with whom I shared a racial shorthand and an understanding of Black life was truly something special. To the end, if you are a non-Black person who aspires to allyhood but pushes back against this, either through vocal disapproval or silent resentment, your view of allyhood is misguided. I would ask folks of all backgrounds to respect that one performance is reserved for the community that the show was written about and for. And hopefully this is a little bit of a dissertation, but if you do have a curiosity to read it, you can find it on Facebook. I think it's public. But it kind of addressed a lot of the controversy that has been happening in and around theater and the public at large. There's been shows that have been canceled or have to reword or, have some PR behind it. There's been class action lawsuits against theaters for having blackout nights. And so it is very much a political choice in some spaces. And, this discussion is kind of why we should preserve and protect and honor and I guess continue doing this type of work. I had a few questions just so we can start a discussion if you feel comfortable sharing your thoughts. For those, okay, hold on. Do I have two questions? Okay, let me not start with that one. We'll ease on in. I have two. In a city where in a city as hyperdiverse as Toronto, where intersectional identities are the norm, does segmenting audiences by a single identity, like race, simplify our lived experiences too much? How might we design specialized nights that honor intersectionality without creating new barriers? If they're considered barriers at all. Any thoughts on that? Sure. In a city as hyper-diverse as Toronto, which is really huge when you do travel outside of the city, where intersectional identities, such as being mixed, are the norm, does segmenting audiences by a single identity, like race, simplify our lived experiences too much? How might we design specialized nights that honor intersectionality without creating new barriers?
I so this whole conversation and some of the, I think, critical feedback about events such as a blackout night kind of has me thinking largely or more largely about, you know, does equality mean homogeneousness, or can we create space to, actually witness each other's otherness? There's a part of me that thinks that an event like this is speaking to something that's very specific, right? And that, I'm thinking about it a lot these days. And so I guess I'm curious, like, what other people might be thinking about that too, right? Like, is there something to be said for does equality, is it more honest when you and I can look at each other and say, like, we are vastly different, but I honor your difference and I honor where we might meet, right? And I honor where I can learn from you. It's a question. I don't know.
Yeah, does equality equal homogeneousness? What? Um, yeah, do we want to, yeah, do we want to riff off of that?
Yeah, I just think sometimes, in the larger conversation of DEI, like, that's what it becomes, right? Like, when we talk about inclusion, so it's a little bit more complicated than that, but I think there's something there. Yeah, I'm curious to hear how people, like, what are some of the colors of that?
I think for people accustomed to taking up all the space all the time, it will feel like inequality. Um, the brother who talked about, uh, I can't remember how he said it, but I did notice the small b. So for me, he was enacting whiteness. Anyone can enact whiteness or reenact whiteness, unfortunately. I do feel, for me, blackout celebration nights are a place for me to feel seen and witnessed in a room where I don't feel like I'm the only one there. Like when I go to theater on a regular night, sometimes I can look around and count less than one hand, like I'm the only one there. And yes, sometimes I do feel was oppressed in that space by some of the questions that are asked of me by white attendees, where that wouldn't generally happen in a Black celebration night experience. I think it's a valuable addition to the theater experience. I appreciate it. I look out for it, and those are the nights I go when I can. Um, yeah, and so equality does feel like inequality if you're used to privilege like that all the time.
Yeah, I would add that by focusing on the response of the general or non-black potential audience, the gaze is being shifted again. It's being returned. So that bothers me. That's problematic in my view. And also about your question on intersectionality, in my understanding is that it's about shifting identities and locations. So it's never the case that I walk into a room and my race is the most important thing about me. That changes. Sometimes it is. Sometimes my gender is. Sometimes my working class background is. So I see this blackout nights as a time in which people choose to prioritize their race, to think about their race, to be in that realm. So I think it's an incredible idea.
I also love that intersectionality is it it allows you to hold your identities and not and bring them forward at different times in different spaces. Um, I lost my thought. I'll go on to my next question because I think it was just touched upon. Um, for those of us who have been the only one or one of a few in a room, how does the presence of a majority group change your physical and emotional reaction to the art? And for those in the mainstream majority, what is the value or discomfort in being asked to step back to allow another group to center their own experience? Thoughts?
Thank you. I love the idea of having blackout nights, and I find it interesting that that's the only thing that gets pushed back because other communities do this all the time, right? Based on different different things. Like there's like when any other community gets together, and it's like First Nations people do it, different groups of POC do it, but the pushback always seems to be when it's black focused, because when that is a very unique experience, and there is, like what you were saying, safety in being around, being seen, being heard, being valued, and knowing that you're around people that share your lived experience. So I think it's a high value thing that everybody should sow into. There's value in having experiences where everyone is one, but also creating space for those. Like when I'm starting seeds, for instance, you can't just, again, mix a bunch of seeds. Seeds are going to do better when they're in their own group because they all take up different amount of space and things like that. And then later, when they're strong enough, you could integrate them with, especially for children, I think, and we advocate for this in the Bay of Quinte region, that there's this program called Shine Club that's Ophelia Wright she introduced to the Catholic School Board. It's BIPOC because there are very few Black only youth, but it's a once a week lunch program for racialized youth to come together, separate from everybody else, to have safe space to build their identity and feel confident in who they are. So I think it's very high value. I think everybody should support it and sow into it and make space for it.
Well, it's a good point, even talking about systems at play, because there's the blackout night. It's kind of like the final product in a sense. But even with bidding to purchase shows, there's Obsidian Theater, and I haven't been to Nia Center, sorry, but it's a black. I know, I know, I know, I know. Do better, do better. I've been waiting for that space to open for a while now. It's here, and I'm like here. But I see from a distance. I'm supporting from a distance. But it's you know, I think the only space in the city dedicated to, for the arts, performance arts, it's on Eglinton and Oakwood or somewhere. Oakwood and Vaughan, thank you. Um, but besides that, I know there's also band gallery and a few sprinkled here or pop up here and closed down here. Oh, there's a Black Theater School, run by Debbie Young. But space in itself is very hard to come by. And that's also where a lot of negotiation comes into play of the show that you intend to have and the rules of the space or the policies or the culture of the space. A lot of times, you get a certain slot, maybe the less desirable slot. Maybe you have to put a bigger deposit. Maybe you have to have security at your event. Like a lot of things will come in tangent with not having space and being in another demographic space who is able to have rights to a show. So, for example, I know I've been using slave play a lot, but it's just buzzing. But you might have two companies that are both wanting to produce the show, and the one that has the most means and most resources will usually outbid. So that's part of the system and how it's produced and who it's produced by. And then may come back to the said theater and say, oh, we need help with casting. We don't know any Black actors. So it's just wild. It's a wild thing to play in this game. And so that's even more so why I advocate and push for blackout nights, because there's so many steps just to get to the show, and sometimes we don't even make it there, or sometimes it's on the backs of a team of 2 or 3 people at the office, credit cards maxing out, and just a lot of systemic barriers that are not part of the discussion, but are key to why this is so important to hold space. Because if you do all this just to have a non-diverse audience throughout the run, it's really disheartening, because you feel like the people that definitely need to see the show need to be outreached, and that's needs a whole plan behind it. And even though we have the 10-page letter of what a blackout night is at some spaces, I think it's still a step forward, and that's something to appreciate. But I would say even more so to support Black theaters, because this is just what we do. It's organic, and it doesn't come with all the legalese. It's just what we do. And sometimes it is mainstream and sometimes it's not, depending on what's hot, what's trending. But I'll wrap it up there. I don't think I have any other slides, and I don't want to run over time. Any final thoughts anyone wants to share? I also wrote an article, if you're curious. It's on my website, Drama. It's like drama, but with 5 A's. .com, because I'm dramatic outside of my soft-spokenness. It's called 3 Tips on Producing Culturally Specific Work. And it goes into basically what we discussed in this workshop, my jump-off point experiences, and some critiques about how things are being done in the city. And yeah, if you ever do want to chat, connect, you can reach me there. Enjoy the rest of this lovely conference. Thank you for having me.